My name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my May reading wrap-up. Hi, hello! This month I managed to read 10 books, which is quite middling for me usually, although this year it just seems like we're gonna be aiming for the 10 to 9 number, except for February. February I read 16, don't know how I did that. But this month was good and fun of a reading month. It wasn't too crazy, but it was Medieval-a-thon. So if you know what Medieval-a-thon is, it is a month-long readathon hosted by Holly Hearts Books. Holly, a lovely, lovely friend of mine here on the internet, and I this month finally got to join in, or this year I guess you could say, finally got to join in, and it was so much fun. I joined the Discord and all of us were just hyping each other up and like reading so many wonderful books, and it was fantastic. So I'm gonna make this pretty quick because I did talk about all these books as I read them during my reading vlogs this month. So as I said, 10 books this month. Out of those 10 books, I had 1 YA fantasy, 4 regular adult fantasies, 1 adult sci-fi, 1 middle grade, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 1 nonfiction. I should say also 9 of the books I read from Medieval-a-thon. The 10th book was a book club pick that my friend had picked for this month as well, which I will talk about. For ratings wise, I had 1 2.5 star, 1 3.5 star, 2 4 stars, 4 4.5 stars, and 1 5 star, along with 1 that I left unrated. So let's just dive in. Let's just dive into this juicy May reading list. So first up, I ended up reading City of Dusk by Tara Sim, which is an adult sci-fi that deals with gods and mortals. This city that is dying, question mark, because due to an event a while ago, I don't remember how long ago it was, but called The Sealing, S-E-A-L-I-N-G, where it essentially cut off the god's magic almost entirely from the mortal realm, and now the mortal realm is dying. So it follows 4 different, like, houses, I guess you could say, and each one of them have different magics that they deal with. So we have like the elementals, we have the necromancers, we have the shadow people, and we have the light people. It's a good time. And there's also a 5th POV in here. We get a couple POVs in here from the heirs or kids of the houses who have the power essentially that they can wield from the gods. Very good. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next up, I ended up reading Helm of Midnight by Marina Lestetter. This one I gave 4.5 stars to. It was so good. It wasn't quite a new favorite, which is why it didn't get a 5 star. And there were also, I feel like it could have been shorter, even though the lengthy bit of it, because it's over 400 pages, added to the suspense and the thrill of it, because this is, I guess you could pitch it as like a horror or a thriller fantasy, which is really cool because like right from the word go, we are set up with this dripping, cold, like oppressive atmosphere, kind of, which is very, very interesting. It's like a race against time and also a murder mystery and a thrillery type of thing, because it follows 3 characters. It follows 3 characters. Our main character, Krona, who starts the book, who is what they call a regulator in this, wherein she, at the beginning of this, is guarding a bunch of artifacts at like a party, and they end up getting stolen in an attack by these like demon creature things that are terrifying. Absolutely terrifying to read about. And in this world, we have a really interesting magic system. So there's a magic system where you can imbue gems with emotions. And then if you have like, let's say, bracers with these gems inlaid, you then are influenced by those emotions. So Krona, our main character, has at the beginning 2 bracers. One is for courage and one is for like resilience or something. So it's like her thing that she has. There's also a magic system in this where there are death masks made for people. It can be like written in your will that you want a death mask made, and there's like this whole process that you have to go through before you die to line up this death mask, and it essentially traps an echo of you in the mask to seal some knowledge of yours in the mask. So at the beginning of this, 2 relics are stolen. One of them is called the Despair Stone, which is such deep, like crippling despair locked in a ruby, and a mask that was made that has the echo of a serial killer in it, the Mask of Charbon. So both of these are stolen, and they're like, all right, great, we got like 12 hours before people start dying. people start dying, right? So they're trying to track down who is committing these murders to get this mask back. And then we also follow another lady in this who has her ties to these masks and the story at large, as well as we get the point of view of Charbon himself from 10 years previous. So we find out why he was murdering all these people as he did, which I really enjoyed this. It was excellent, excellent, excellent atmosphere. And yeah, 4.5 stars. Then for Medieval-a-thon as well, all my books are following. Then I ended up reading Year of the Reaper by Makia Lucier, which is a standalone YA historical fantasy novel that is basically a retelling of the Black Plague, which was surprisingly very, very, very good. I finished this in like 3-4 hours of sitting down one day, and it was so easily readable. It read to me like something that would sit in an almost like in between YA and adult fantasy. That's like a good bridge over, because the way that it was written in the prose and like the themes that it dealt with felt more adult, but it was definitely very approachable from a YA audience. So it dealt with like dark themes, and it's a plague book, of course, because the Black Plague, but it essentially follows our main character as he has come back from being locked in a prison for 3 years. He is the lone survivor of the plague that ravaged that jail, and his whole kingdom, his whole family thought he was dead. So when he walks back in, having actually survived and lived through the plague, everyone's like, oh my god, we didn't know that was a thing. We didn't know you could survive the plague. So he comes back, and the day that he comes back, the king and the queen of the land, I guess, or from a neighboring kingdom, are visiting, and an assassination attempt, they believe, on their baby son. So he saves the son from drowning, because there's this whole moment. So then he gets like, because he's also like a royal, he gets roped into that life again, and then there's this like plot as to like what's happening with the assassination attempt and all that kind of stuff. It's very good. It's slower, it's not as action-packed, but it is definitely worth the read. I do recommend it. 4 stars, I should say. I don't know if I said that one, but 4 stars. Then I ended up reading a sequel to a book that I've been really meaning to read for a while, and I had so much fun reading it. That is Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, which is the sequel to Finlay Donovan is Killing It. So this book was just absolutely fabulous, and I really, really enjoyed my time. I think I liked the first one a little bit better because it has that like shiny new book feel to it. This is a definite kick into gear of this plot that's happening in the first one, and I'm shook by the ending, and I'm excited to see where the next one goes as well. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Very, very good. It is the perfect amount of like absurd, fun, mystery, rom-com-ness, you know? So essentially the story of Finlay Donovan is, it's this mom a single mom who is struggling. Her ex-husband is threatening to essentially like bid for full custody of the kids because she's just not making money. She is experiencing desperately crippling writer's block, and she is discussing her previous novels with her agent in the middle of a like coffee shop. Essentially, it's a Panera Bread. And as they're discussing it, like the language that they're using is very just kind of open. And a lady who's sitting at the table next to them misunderstands the situation and essentially wants to hire Finlay because she thinks she's a hitman. And she wants to hire Finlay to kill her husband for $50,000. And so that number, the $50,000, like haunts Finlay, and she ends up getting tied up in this with her nanny, Vero, who is just awesome. I love Vero so much. And so that is basically the plot of the first one. They get caught up in that. And this is the continuation of it, which is just, it's great. I love these books. They are so much fun. And I ended up giving them 4 stars, if I didn't already mention that. Next up, finally got around to reading Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, which is the sequel to Gideon the Ninth. This was so much fun. I love Tamsin Muir's world and writing and everything. This one follows Harrow's point of view, whereas Gideon followed Gideon's point of view. And I like Gideon the Ninth more than Harrow the Ninth because of that, because I think Gideon's narration style is more fun than Harrow's. And this, for like 80% of it, you don't really know what's going on because Harrow herself is insane and she's like hallucinating and she's making up stuff. And the order in which we get the chain of events that happen in this book are completely out of order and bamboozled. And you just kind of have to keep reading, knowing full well what happened actually in the events of Gideon the Ninth, and then coming to Harrow the Ninth and like weeding through it until you get to a moment in Gideon in Harrow and you're like, that's what's happening. This is what I love most about Tamsin Muir's writing. It's absolutely batshit. It's so wild, but it's so satisfying because you're having so much fun not knowing what's happening. And it's just a wild ride of language and jokes and memes and all this kind of stuff trapped in a sci-fi fantasy novel. And then you get that satisfaction of like, you understand what's happening at the end and it's like your brain sighs in happiness. I don't know what it is. There's a moment in here that my brain just exploded and like I was annotating this and there's a few pages that are just covered in love hearts because I was so excited as to what was happening. Yes, 4 stars for Harrow the Ninth. Definitely so good. And I cannot wait for the 3rd one to come out. Known of the Ninth is coming out later this year. I'm so excited. Up next for Medieval-a-thon, I ended up finally reading Vox Machina's Kith and Kin, which is the Critical Role novel that they released by Marieke Niekamp. I listened to the audiobook and I think that's how you pronounce her name. I'm not entirely sure, but the audiobook was a damn treat. So, as I said in my vlog, this is definitely a good recommendation for Critical Role fans. If you are a Critical Role fan, definitely try pick this up. It's very fun, and if you love the twins, even better, because it follows Vex and Vax, the twins that we know from Campaign 1, from Vox Machina, and a little bit of their backstory. So this essentially plots what happens to Vex and Vax when they are on their own before they meet the rest of the crew. Not all of it, but like a slice of it, concerning the clasp, and one of their like little mini adventures within that. And I really enjoyed the story and all that, but I think as a standalone fantasy book, if you detach it from the Critical Role fandom, it is just fine. So I probably wouldn't recommend it to anybody who doesn't know Critical Role, because as a Critical Role fan, I was reading through it and I was catching little things that are from the live performance, live streaming of the game, and I knew what these events were precluding and that kind of a stuff, and I recognized like names of places and little things like that, and like little hints and like jokes that are in the dialogue that I was like, oh, I understand that reference, you know? So if you're not a Critical Role fan, probably don't pick this up, but if you are, consider it, because it was definitely a fun ride and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars for that reason, for the reason that it doesn't really stand up as a fantasy novel on its own. But for the fact that it is a Critical Role novel, I really enjoyed it. And the audiobook was so good. It's narrated by Robbie Daymond, who, if you don't know who Robbie Daymond is, he narrates also the Trials of Apollo audiobooks. He's very good at it. But he also guested on Critical Role in Exandria Unlimited, first one and the second one, and also in Campaign 3. He's Dorian Storm. So he is just wonderful. So he narrated it. But they also had Liam and Laura voice Vex and Vax throughout the audiobook, which was just superbly well done. The audiobook was a joyful experience and I really had a good time. But yeah, 3.5 stars for this one. Up next, we had kind of a disappointment. This one I ended up only giving 2 stars to, 2.5 stars, and that is The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. I went in with like fairly no expectations because I didn't really know what to expect. Although I did go in thinking, this looks like it could be a Viking-y book, potentially, due to the, I don't know, tusk on the front. It feels like it could be a medieval fantasy type of thing. And it kind of starts that way. We start off with a young girl in a death cult who is going to be sacrificed. She has been chosen to be sacrificed, to be part of this, you know, ritual that happens every 14 years. But she ends up getting away with another man who essentially is like, I'm gonna hire you to just be my assistant, I guess. And it goes from there, and it tries to be too much. It tries to be medieval fantasy with like gods and like the landscape mixed with portal fantasy, because we have like almost a sci-fi level of gate jumping between areas of this world. Like the map in the front doesn't feel like it fits at all to this world because it's literally pieces of paper layered on top of one another to like demonstrate the portal worlds. And then by the end of it, we're dealing with like them flying around in spaceship type things. So it's trying to do too much. And the story didn't compel me because it's not well balanced. So this spans 8 years of Kasorwe, our main character's life. Kasorwe herself is an orc also, which is very medieval fantasy, but placed in a world like orcs and elves, and I don't even think there's any humans mentioned in here, but it's all this medieval fantasy mixed with like sci-fi, and it would be really cool if it was done well, but it just wasn't balanced very well. Like the first 100 pages are the first 3 years of Kasorwe's life. The next like 200 pages are a year for maybe 2 years. And then we time jump, and then it's like a couple weeks for the rest of the book. It just wasn't for me. So 2.5 stars. It does have a queer cast though, so I want to give it that. But that's like the only thing that's going for it. And the writing was like, okay. The actual like structure of the sentences were fine. Anyways, next up we had an almost favorite of the month, and that was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is her kind of like age range bending, but I want to call it an upper middle grade book that is a standalone that she's compared to like Crimson Peak and fairy tale vibe. It is atmospheric. It drips with tension. I loved this book. It is not to the level of connection with the characters as I got from Addie LaRue, which is kind of why I'm putting it in upper middle grade, because it feels like that. It doesn't have the, I don't want to say it doesn't have the depth of some adult novels, but it doesn't. But that's not to say all middle grades don't have depth. But usually middle grades move a little quicker and they don't really dwell in those moments to really connect us to the characters, you know? I digress. This was fantastic. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really liked this. This is my second favorite V.E. Schwab. And I feel like I'm in the minority saying that, but I loved this. It was so beautifully written. And this is a absolute masterpiece of what V.E. Schwab can do, in my opinion. I've read her debut, Near Witch, and then I've read this one now. I haven't read everything else of hers, but I have read like a few middling ones in the middle. But having that bookend of the Near Witch and then this one is fantastic because I can see in the Near Witch which I didn't really like, the seeds of what she can now accomplish, which is so cool with atmosphere and slow moving, revolving creepiness. I really like this. Anyways, then I read Why She Wrote by Lauren Burke and Hannah K. Chapman. These are the ladies who are behind the podcast Bonnets at Dawn. This is also illustrated by Kaylee Bales, because I wanted to mention that specifically because it is partially a graphic novel style history. It's very cool. I left this unrated because it is a nonfiction overview of 18 different women writers out of history who have influenced the literary canon now. And I say overview because it really is. Like we get like a page of their life in an essay form, and then we get a graphic novel telling of a moment that was pinnacle in these women's lives. So for example, in this we have Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, so we get a little bit of her life in the essay and her like, you know, literary prowess, and then we get the graphic novel portion demonstrates the moment when she thought up Frankenstein itself, when she was in that house with Lord Byron and her husband and her sister. So it was very good and I enjoyed it. But yeah, I'm leaving this unrated. And then last up this month, the last book that I read in the month of May is my favorite book of the month, which beat out Gallant for favorite, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was such a near perfect book for me. Like so close, my guys. Beach Read was my favorite Emily Henry until I read this one. Now this one is my favorite Emily Henry. So now it goes Book Lovers, Beach Read, and then People We Met on Vacation. This is so good. It would have been better if it was dual point of view. It would have been better if it was dual point of view so that we could have gotten, there's multiple times in here where I was screaming I'm like, I want his point of view. I want the guy's point of view, but I understand before you come for me in the comments. I understand that this is a book that features the love story, of course, but it also features really heavily the sibling dynamic between the two sisters in this. So if it had the dual point of view, it probably would have had to been trimmed back a little bit, and we probably wouldn't have gotten the hit of the sisters' relationship, you know? So in that aspect, it was a perfect book. It did what it wanted to do. It was fabulous. This is the book club pick for this month. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about because I loved this so much. And when I love books, I have nothing to talk about. I'm just going to sit there and gush about it. Like, that's about it. That's about it. Like, the only thing that could have been better is if we got a little bit of the guy's point of view. So this follows Nora Stevens, who is a literary agent who is known to be a shark, essentially. She's very cold. She is the stereotypical woman you see in Hallmark movies who is the girlfriend before the man finds the love of his life. She's the girlfriend from the city who's cold and unfeeling, you know? And then we have Charlie Lastra, who is equally as cutthroat, but he is a book editor. And at the beginning of this, we get a prologue of them first meeting, and it is immediately like bantery and they don't like each other, and they're having this moment of just like, absolutely not. I will not buy this book that you're trying to pitch me, essentially. But then they fall in love, and the tension in this is just exceptional. And if you couldn't tell, I annotated the hell out of this. So if you guys don't know, I do that, like running the pen down the side of the page annotation style. Oh, this was just fabulous. This was absolutely incredible. I was bawling at the end of it. If you've seen my most recent vlog, you will see that the tension in this is so good. I will probably never let anyone near me read this copy of this book because it is a direct look at my psyche right now because I was venting so hard in so many different moments, like 1 a.m. thoughts, just writing them all down, all that kind of stuff. But definitely a favorite. Definitely a favorite of the year. Incredible. Loved this. Anyways, my lovely friends, that is it for me. Those are all the books that I read in the month of May. For Medieval-a-thon wrap up, I guess I should say what I ended up with in general. I didn't end up finishing The Dragon of Jinsayang. I'm about 200 pages into it by K.S. Filoso, which was the last book that I had on my Medieval-a-thon TBR. It was just too big and there's no audiobook, so I couldn't like push myself through it, and I don't want to. I really want to sit in that book and like love the ending of it as I get through because it is the finale of a trilogy that I really, really like. So out of all of that, I am an Empress. I've read up to the Empress part, their Empress mark, and I myself am a level 4 armorsmith, and I have a companion who is a legendary level 5 bard. So I really enjoyed Medieval-a-thon, and I'm really glad that I did this because it also allowed me to read exclusively books that were already on my shelves for this month, which is awesome because that means I have read 10 books that were on my TBR this month, which is just great. Physical TBR is slowly shrinking and increasing on the other side because I keep buying books. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite book of the month was, because y'all know I'm always here to add more books to my TBR. But thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in another video very, very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.